Noob D&D Dad here, and I finally did it. Finally got session 1 in the bag for my little kid D&D group. So I'm already DMing for 2 groups, one being my son and my friend and the cousin, and 2 being the Army Veterans group. And so the little kids wanted to play, right? So I am now DMing for a 3rd group, and I'm a noob DM. And so my 3rd group is my 9-year-old son, 5-year-old daughter, 3-year-old daughter, and then eventually 2-year-old when he wants to play. So really little kid D&D. So we finally finished session 0, and I basically just did their sheets except for my older son. He wanted to have a background, so we got that out of the book and added stuff accordingly and added his gear according to how the book works. And then my middle daughter, I added most stuff, and then I just asked her what weapons she wanted, and I only let her choose weapons that work for a monk. So she wanted a short sword and a light hammer. She actually specified that she wanted a light hammer. So, and then my youngest daughter, who's only 3, we didn't bother with a background for her, and I just picked everything for her. So my son picked his fighting style to be archer, and for my daughter I picked protection, so she could protect with a shield because she's a fighter, and then I picked all of her gear. So I just drew this little map to be like my DM map, because I already have that really big map I showed in the last video about the little kid D&D. So basically they live in this castle in this bottom corner. So it's a dragonborn fighter, and a tiefling monk, and their parents are the king and queen of this kingdom, and they are sick. And the dad is a dragonborn dad, and the mom is a tiefling mom. And so it's kind of like a Disney movie where the kids just popped out being like, there's some that are dragonborn and some that are tieflings instead of mixing them. So the parents are sick, and the apothecary, and again, like I'm explaining what an apothecary is to my kids. So I'm like, the apothecary came in and tried everything and nothing would work. And so the apothecary tells you that you need to travel to this inn at the crossroads. It's called the Crusty Juggler. Bonus points if you know what movie reference that's from. And meet the triple hooded explorer to find out where to find the white lotus flower, so you can bring it back, they can boil it into a tea and make them better. So that's their mission. So they get all their adventuring gear and they set off, and I go through each of them one at a time saying, okay, now what do you want to do? Okay, you're going down the stairs to the courtyard. Okay, here's what you see. Okay, now what are you going to do? So the 2 older ones are like, okay, I'm going to go down the stairs, I'm going to do this. And then I describe what they see. And then the youngest one, my 3-year-old, I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do? And she's like, I'm going to fight the bad guys. And I'm like, okay, you're here, you're just happy to be here, I get it. Anyway, so they get moving, and before not too long, they encounter kobolds, which I'd been really wanting to fight, but they just don't come up in the Dragon of Icespire Peak. And I figured these are weak. They have like their AC 12 with hit points 5. So I actually lowered their AC to 10. And here's the thing. So I talked about the rules for little kid D&D, right? So I removed proficiency and just added advantage to anything that needs that. And I mentioned in my rules, my last video talking about the rules, that I'm going to have the rule of simple. And it was hard to explain, but in actual practice for them doing their first session, I think I can like explain how rule of simple works. So they're fighting these kobolds, right? I'll come back to the actual encounter after I talk about some of the background stuff. So they're fighting them, and my older son's like, what are my pluses or what are this? I'm like, just don't worry about it. Just roll. We're not going to worry about that. And so the rule of simple happened anytime where I was looking at the character sheet being like, okay, what do I add here? And I was just like, you know what? Skip it. So anytime I would basically be slowed down by doing too much calculations or too much math, I would basically just be like, okay, you roll, and you got higher or you got lower and you hit it. Or, oh, you swung your sword and you missed. You totally missed, right? So I just brought it really simple. So I might be doing calculations on my end, but I don't bother telling them like, okay, your dexterity, your roll initiative, your dexterity gives you +2. Like, I don't bother with that. I'm just like, okay, roll. I'm like, okay, so you're going to go first. So it's like I'm using more rules in the game than they are, but I'm just like structuring it and then just interpreting what happens instead of where normally the players actually are following along with the rules, if that makes sense. So I'm simplifying it for them. I'm also removing things on the fly. So I know that's not like definitive, like what to remove and what to keep, but basically the rule of thumb is to keep the story flowing, because really I'm just sitting and telling a story to these kids that they get to interact in. Now, I think they really like that, because when I would tell them bedtime stories that are kind of like this with castles and fantasy and stuff, they would want to say what happens. And I'm like, no, this is a story, you're listening. But in D&D, they get to have, it's like a choose your own adventure. So I think they're really liking to be empowered by the choices. Okay, back to the kobolds. So I'm so excited to use them. And I basically have them pop out from behind a giant rock. There's 3 of them. And they're just like, hey, give us all your gold. We're bullies, and we're going to fight you and take your gold. And they're basically like, and we dropped out of school, and we're lazy, and we don't want to get jobs, so we only rob people and take their money, so that's how we buy stuff. And we're bad. Like, just literally, like, right on the nose. So they popped out and said that, and then, my kids are like, okay, I want to do this, And then as we're the fight's progressing and I'm telling them who has what initiative, I'm trying to explain the gravity of the situation. Like, these are robbers, and they're so bad that they would kill you to take your stuff if you don't give it to them. Like, I wanted to kind of bring up that there's like a threat here. And like, my wife is listening to this, like she's off doing something else and she's listening to it and like kind of looking over. Anyway, and then so they start beating down this kobold, and eventually they wipe out its tiny amount of hit points, and I'm like, okay, and then you kill it. And my wife's like, excuse me? And I'm like, oh, okay. We're not going to be lobbing off heads in this campaign, I guess. So I say, okay, what did I say? Okay, so you knocked them out, right? So everyone is getting knocked out in this campaign because my wife doesn't want us chopping heads off. Anyway, so they defeated the kobolds, and I had them each roll a d6 to see how much gold they found on them. And I was like, should I do copper and silver? And I'm like, right now I might just do gold. Like, literally just not worry about the other coins. So I had them each roll a d6. That's how much gold they got off the body, and they were all very excited to loot the bodies and get gold. So they go on their journey, and my kids aren't able to understand. I mean, maybe I should put hexes in this, and I'm like, because it's a long ways to get to the inn. So now that I had them try combat, right? So they got to pick their moves. Like, my daughter was like headbutting them, and then my other daughter was using her shield. I think they had fun using their moves, right? Their specific moves and their gear. So now I wanted them to have like a social interaction. And I really like, even in the other campaigns with the Army Veterans group, I like to present an NPC who's in trouble and needs help and see how they react. So basically I had this lady, I can't remember what, so along the road, I can't remember what her circumstance was, like if she was just like laying on the ground and like crying or something, but they stopped to help her, and they're like, what's wrong? And she was like sick and needed food and water or something. So I was like, what are you guys going to do? And they're like, okay, we're going to pick her up. I'm like, okay, who's picking her up? So basically they talked among themselves to see who picked them up. They decided that the 2 girls would pick the person up, and then my son would like guard them, right? And I was like, oh, cool, that's cool. They have like providing security while they're moving. And at this point I had a really bad migraine, and I was completely losing most of my vision because I get ocular migraines with aura. And so anyway, they're coming up to the inn, and then I have them meet the innkeeper and just be like, hey, we want to take care of this girl and get her a room and get her medicine. So I just gave them an opportunity to make that choice to help someone. And that's session 1 for Little Kid D&D. And it was awesome. It was pretty short. We had to keep it short. 1, because I had a migraine, and 2, just their attention span is not well. But Little Kid D&D is hard. And it's not because it's hard to adapt the rules. Like, I feel like that's been not too bad. I'm just trying to learn the rules because I'm still a noob DM. But what's hard is getting them all in the same place at the same time, getting them to do their chores so that they can play D&D, and getting them to listen while I'm doing the narration and stuff. So, like, I mean, it's hard. Little Kid D&D is hard. There's a reason D&D is recommended for a certain age, because they just don't want to sit. So other than that, it is a blast. They're all having fun. They're all looking forward to session number 2, where they can find out what's going on at this inn, and they can meet this explorer and hopefully find the medicine to save their parents. So I'm having a blast. I think they're having fun, and it was interesting making it very, very, very simple and streamlining it on the fly. And I don't think you have to sit and write down rules for weeks and weeks. I think you can just adjust it on the fly and still use D&D. I know everyone's like, use a simpler RPG, and it's like, they want to play D&D. they want to play what we're playing. And so that's what we're going to do. Okay, now there has been an offshoot campaign that my son is DMing for. So I've been tabbing my books, right? Like for the kobold and what else is in there? Like the gelatinous cube and whatever. I let him borrow my book today to DM for his little sisters. And so he started tabbing. So now my monster manual has tabs that my son put there because he's DMing now and he's loving it. And I know I don't even know what he's doing, but he drew a map and they're doing campaigns and making choices and cutting off heads. And even though I told them they're not allowed to do that, but they're loving it. They're absolutely loving it. So hopefully we can also keep them physically active. And this is fun though. This seems like it's going to be a fun little family thing. So that is Little Kid D&D Session 1. So let me know what you think of this. Or if you're just here for like the big kid campaigns. Because I do on this channel, I talk about the army campaign, my campaign with my son, and now this little kid campaign. So I am a Noob D&D dad for 3 groups. DM for 3 groups. So let me know what you think. Love to hear from you. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye.